This is going to be about Shay's rebellion. In the course of looking into something else, I came across a mention of Shay's rebellion. I think I had heard about it, but never cared to examine it in any detail. I did so now. It was a clear instance that demonstrated when a revolution has been completed and a new government assumes the power, the last thing it wants to see is another revolution. In fact, it will go to any length to prevent it. And so you have one generation of revolutionaries and freedom fighters quashing another as completely and efficiently as possible. It's not a question of groups sharing a similar ideal, the love of freedom. It is one group in power determined to hold on to that. Opposition, for whatever reason, is dangerous, perhaps fatal. The situation was this. In the early 1780s, after the end of the war, many farmers in New England were getting on by subsistence, scrambling to survive. They bartered for food and clothing, ran tabs on trust when they could not afford to pay. Merchants on the coast were doing much better, but the Europeans they traded with began to insist on full payment, or no business would be done at all. And so the merchants had to ask the farmers to pay. When they could not, their belongings were taken, their animals, their land. They had just returned from fighting in the war for freedom and were now losing everything to tax collectors, sheriffs, bankers, and lawyers. They had just fought over this very issue, taxation, and now they were getting not the short end of the stick, but no stick at all. In addition, many of them had never been paid for their service in the war. Daniel Shays was one of these. He had joined the Continental Army, fought in several battles, was wounded, retired unpaid from the Army, went home and found himself in court for unpaid debts. Already there was some resistance to this among farmers who could not pay back taxes or new property taxes. In 1786, a group of farmers forcibly shut down a court in Massachusetts. The governor called it a mob action and promised a military response if it was repeated. When it was, he summoned a state militia, but it refused to turn out, sympathetic to the plight of the farmers. The governor accused them all of sedition and said they were insulting the dignity of government, and declared it was British agitators who were inciting the farmers. Sam Adams, the great proponent of liberty, proposed a law which made rebellion a crime punishable by execution. Some of the leaders of the revolt were arrested. Merchants paid to raise a privately funded army of 3,000 men. The rebels targeted a federal armory. They wanted to seize it and make use of its weapons. It was to be a three-pronged attack, but communication lines were broken, messages were intercepted, and the attack proved to be a botched attempt, easily repulsed. The militia defending the armory were ordered to fire over the heads of the rebels, and 2 cannons were ignited, sending grape shot into the men, killing 2 and wounding 20. The rebels fled, raiding merchants for food and taking some hostages. They had lost the initiative and they dispersed, went into hiding. There was one final battle in Sheffield at a cost of 30 wounded, and that was the end of the armed conflict. 4,000 men signed written confessions of rebellion. Several hundred were indicted, most pardoned by a general amnesty. 2 men were hanged, accused of looting. Daniel Shays was labeled an anarchist. He spent some time hiding out in the woods of Vermont, then moved to western New York State, where he died in poverty. The federal government was operating under the Articles of Confederation. This was now considered insufficient. The central government, I gotta clear my eyes of salt tears, I can't see a thing. The central government had to be strengthened and was led to the new, more powerful constitution. And this led to the new, more powerful constitution, needed to defend the government against the cursed spirit of insurgency. A memorial on the battle site of the uprising reads in part, "Obedience to the law is true liberty." Jefferson thought that minor rebellions might be good for the nation. He said that the blood of the rebels was good manure for the tree of liberty. Washington was completely opposed to rebellion of any kind for any reason. It was one of the reasons he agreed to lead the country. Shortly after his first inauguration, he directed federal troops to put down what came to be known as the Whiskey Rebellion, a protest against a tax on whiskey. America, born in revolution, was done with revolution. That would be until several southern states seceded from the Union, another rebellion that had to be squashed, providing plenty of manure for Mr. Jefferson's tree.